We remain deeply concerned about New York City and the New York metro area. About 56% of all the cases in the United States are coming out of that metro area, and 60% of all the new cases are coming out of the metro New York area, and 31% of the people succumbing to this disease. But to everyone who has left New York over the last few days, because of the rate of the number of cases, you may have been exposed before you left New York. And I think, like Governor DeSantis has put out today, everybody who was in New York should be self-quarantining for the next 14 days to ensure that the virus doesn't spread to others, no matter where they have gone, whether it's Florida, North Carolina, or out to far reaches of Long Island. We are starting to see new cases across Long Island that suggest people have left the city. So this will be very critical that those individuals do self-quarantine in their homes over these next 14 days to make sure they don't pass the virus to others based on the time that they left New York. So if they've already are 4 days out, then it's just 10 more days.
For anyone in the New York metropolitan area who has traveled, our task force is encouraging you to monitor your temperature, be sensitive to symptoms, and we are asking anyone who has traveled out of the New York City metropolitan area to anywhere else in the country to self-isolate for 14 days. We have to deal with the New York City metropolitan area as a high-risk area. And for that reason, we're taking these steps and asking for the cooperation of the American people.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to NeoUnrealist. You heard it there from the White House yesterday, as spoken by Dr. Deborah Birx, and she was then backed up by the Vice President and head of the President's Wuhan Coronavirus Task Force, Mike Pence. All persons who have left New York over the past 2 weeks should be under a self-imposed quarantine that ends 14 days after the date they departed. Dr. Birx said the Trump administration remains deeply concerned about New York City and the New York metro area. She explained that 56% of all the cases in the United States are coming out of the metro area. The metro area that yours truly happens to be in the middle of at this current moment. And that 60% of new cases are coming out of the New York City area, with 31% of those people succumbing to the disease. The lockdown imposed by Governor Cuomo seems to have inspired in the past week or so a situation where many New Yorkers have fled the city for second homes elsewhere, or to stay with relatives or what have you. Now, this led to new clusters popping up in areas of Long Island, for example, where many city residents have summer or vacation homes. And then you could see what inspired the intro to this video, an homage to one of John Carpenter's signature films, Escape from New York. Now, to be fair, the plot of the 1981 science fiction film that starred a then spry 30-year-old Kurt Russell centered on the island of Manhattan being converted into an open-air prison with all of its bridges and tunnels blocked off and a perimeter wall around it to house all the prisoners of a future, well, I guess a future for moviegoers in 1981, a 1997 United States of America that was overrun by crime. The situation being that terrorists hijacked Air Force One, they crashed into New York City, the President of the United States was taken prisoner, and the federal government turned to a prisoner in their custody named Snake Plissken, the character portrayed by Kurt Russell, to go into New York and within 24 hours rescue the president, get him out of the city in exchange for a full pardon. Now, clearly, in the real world, well, I guess scratch that, in what we assume is the real world, as recent events have led many to speculate that we must in fact be living within a simulation. In the world of 2020 New York City, we haven't been physically walled off, but this guidance from the White House, this is about the nearest one can get to the net effect of that. I mean, consider my own situation. As it stands, I'm in Brooklyn right now. By order of the governor of the state of New York, I should only leave my home if I'm alone, and for the purpose of, brief recreation in and around my home, going to the grocery store or pharmacy or seeking medical treatment. There are other, exemptions, of course, but, like if you have to travel to and from work, if your occupation is deemed to be, you're an essential worker, like doctors, nurses, first responders, those kind of people. Yesterday's White House guidance, though, it layers an extra burden upon everyone should they choose to leave New York, and they're asked to self-quarantine for a period of 14 days. So in effect, New York is now effectively a prison, albeit, don't get me wrong, it's something of a gilded cage. I don't mean to imply that these rules are causing, any major suffering, but more or less, it's a restriction on movement, which I just don't think most Americans are accustomed to living with, absent committing a fairly serious crime. I mean, when restrictions on your movement is something you associate with, like, totalitarian regimes like the old Soviet Union, your papers, please. So it's basically in the back of your mind a lot, the fact that it would be something of a pain or a hassle to leave if you wanted to. Now, with that said, how will they enforce this? I mean, as far as I know, the bridges and tunnels, they're not barricaded or bottlenecked in any way. In the 1981 movie, they actually put mines on the bridge, but you can physically go without being stopped or questioned. But I suspect human nature being what it is, now that the White House has asked for this virtual quarantine, many in New York will see that as a sign of a possible future tightening with bridges and tunnels blocked off and losing the physical ability to leave. That which, to my mind, will probably inspire more people to want to, drumroll please, escape from New York. So there it is. Let's take a look at some of the numbers, which have to be what's scaring the crap out of the White House with regard to New York. First of all, total confirmed cases in New York City, when we're talking about the total universe, as of the close of business on March 24th, there were 15,597 cases. Now, rather than look at the distribution of cases as I've done on a couple of my previous live streams, let's have a look at the hospitalization rate for cases by age category, because that's where the rubber meets the road. No one cares about the total cases. It's the number of cases that need to be in a hospital that is the real crux of the problem here. Let's start with the easiest case, the people aged 75 and over. Bottom line, for those 75 and older, that's half of all the known cases in New York City of persons 75 or older that require hospitalization. So basically, if you're Joe Biden's age, looks like it's a coin flip whether or not you have to be admitted to a hospital. Next age category, the 65 to 74s. So you're old enough to start collecting on your Social Security, but for most people in 2020, if they took reasonable care of themselves and they lucked out in not acquiring a serious health issue along the way, they still lead pretty vibrant and productive lives, and many, whether by choice or economic necessity, they are still in the full-time workforce. The hospitalization rate for the 65 to 74s dips a little down from the 75 and overs, down to 33%. So 1 in 3 of this group, if they catch the Wuhan coronavirus, need to be admitted to a hospital. Now that actually doesn't look good, because you're starting to eat into the tail end of the productive working age population there. So that on a large scale across a country would have a significant impact on the workforce. Same for the age 45 to 64 category. These would be your middle-aged adults, and they represent the bulk of the productive workforce, especially in jobs that require experience, know-how. They represent the institutional knowledge and the day-to-day running of most operations. They typically don't yet suffer from age-related issues either. They are by number, raw numbers, the largest group who require hospitalization. But here again, the rate by which they're hospitalized, it dips a little further. 20% of confirmed cases in the 45 to 64 range in New York City need to be admitted to a hospital. So 1 in 5 of that age group. That is basically what is driving the numbers up inside the hospitals. The 1,061 cases in the age 45 to 64 group is almost double the amount in all other age categories, even though at 20% of hospitalization rate is only the third highest. It's because they represent the second most number of confirmed cases. So I was, surprised to see that a whopping 20% of these Gen Xers and late boomers, 20% of them wind up in the hospital for Wuhan coronavirus. The age 18 to 44s were another surprise. About 9% of the 18 to 44s who get the Wuhan coronavirus require hospitalization. Now, while that doesn't sound so bad, hey, just 9%, they are by far the age group that gets the Wuhan coronavirus by a mile. So it's 9% of the single biggest pool of cases. In New York City, over 7,000 of the 15,000 cases are people aged 18 to 44. Almost half of all cases. So that 9% hospitalization rate actually makes them account for, in raw numbers, the second largest number of people in the hospital. Only the 45 to 64s have more people in the hospital. I mean, you heard me. There are more people aged 18 to 44 in the hospital for Wuhan coronavirus in New York City than there are people aged 65 to 74 or even in the 75 and over category. In fact, if you added together the 65 to 74s and you added them to all the 75 and overs, they barely beat out the number of 18 to 44-year-olds for the total number of people that require hospitalization. And for people aged 17 and under, only 7.3% require hospitalization, but as their numbers aren't that large to begin with, they're statistically insignificant. And, just think about it. This would be a problem if people aged 17 and under, if they represented a large number of those infected. But fortunately, children seem to be the least likely to have confirmed cases of the Wuhan coronavirus. So it's believed that that's because when they do in fact catch it, people 17 and under, their symptoms seem to be so mild that it doesn't usually arise to concern in their households, and they self-resolve at home, and a lot of them just are not aware that they had the disease, and they don't rise to the awareness of the medical system. So what does all this mean right now? Well, for now, with New York City as a hospital system under strain, but not quite yet over capacity, it means for the moment it's mostly the old and sick dying. 5% of the 192 who've died in New York City so far had an underlying illness defined as including diabetes, lung disease, cancer, immunodeficiency, heart disease, hypertension, asthma, kidney disease, and gastrointestinal liver disease. 100 of the 192 dead were 75 or older. Those are the people that tend to have a lot of those ailments. They represent about 52% of the total dead. 44 of the deceased were aged 65 to 74 for about 23% of the total. And 43 of those who passed, they were aged 45 to 64, and they account for 22% of the whole. Only 5 people died who were aged 18 to 44, so just 3% of all deaths. No one under the age 17 has died in New York City of Wuhan coronavirus. So as long as the hospital capacity in New York City holds up, it's not exceeded, you can expect that 97% of the dead would be people aged 45 and older, little more than half of the people aged 75 and older as the major component. All fine and good, except depending on which estimates you believe, we're either a few days or a few weeks away from the hospital system in New York being overrun. That is to say, beyond its capacity. Without going too far into it, that's when a place turns into Italy. Because basically the old and sick, they're going to die regardless under any system. But if the younger people who need hospitalization, and as you can see, there are a lot of them, if they can't be taken care of adequately because there's just not enough medical equipment or resources or doctors and nurses, that's when all those high number of younger inpatients start to die. You see, it's a respiratory disease, and if you can't breathe, if you need to be put on a respirator and they're all full, good chance you won't make it. That's what's causing all the alarms to go off in New York and ultimately in Washington at the White House. That's why it looks like a lot of people, they've been trying and are going to try to escape from New York. That's all for this New Unrealist. If you want to help the channel, do me a favor. Hit like for this video, leave a comment below, mash down the subscribe button if you're not already subbed to the channel, and click on the notification bell beside it. Put it on the all setting to keep up with the newer content. And then you got to make sure that your YouTube settings are set to let you have notifications. So it's two things you have to do there. If you want to contribute directly to the channel and toss your hard-earned dollars into the tip jar, follow the links below to Patreon, Subscribestar, or PayPal. Or if you watch this on BitChute, you can just click on the green tip pledge button on the video player. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.